Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Daily Stack. We are here live 5 days a week, starting this week right here. We got me, myself, Rob from Bitcoin News. We've got Avi and Jody from 21 Rates, and a very special guest today is Tony from the Bitcoin Way, a man who has unparalleled experience when it comes to taking your wealth and fleeing a country when hyperinflation is about to hit, as we have just seen in Iran this week. The Omega candle that has been prophesized by none other than Samson Mao is happening to a fiat currency near you, but it starts at the edges. And the edges, we are seeing it, whether it be Lebanon, whether it be Venezuela. We are now seeing it in Iran. Just this week, it went up to over 100 billion Iranian rials because they devalue the currency. There's massive unrest on the streets, and Bitcoin is a way to protect yourself. Hello, gentlemen. How are we doing today?
Good
Fantastic. Coming
nice.
In love it.
Yes, every single day. We got to bring it. We are going live here 5 days a week, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Mark your calendars. Get ready to join us. We're going to have great guests every single week, every single day. Tony is one of the first ones to help us kick it off. So, Tony, please introduce yourself, Bitcoin Way, to the audience, to anyone who might not know of your fabulous company.
Thank you for having me, guys. A pleasure to be here. Yes, so I'm Tony Yazbeck from the Bitcoin Way. We are a company that helps push out proper education around anything and everything Bitcoin. So whether it's how to do self-custody and getting it right the first time, how to protect your personal cybersecurity, and how to find jurisdictions that actually want you, that are pro-Bitcoin, pro-freedom, that respect you as a human being. We handhold you and walk you through that entire process. It's a white glove service from beginning to end. And so we really, frame ourselves as like neutral ground here. We are not biased or sponsored by anyone. We just push out the truth. And if you want to hear unfiltered pieces of advice, recommendations, tips and tricks, come see us. You'll definitely get it here.
Yes, absolutely. You guys have been carrying the flag for years, preaching about self-custody and the importance of self-custody. The fact that this is what separates Bitcoin from any other financial asset, the fact that you can take it, own it, and have it in your head and go across borders when it need be. So, Tony, for anybody who doesn't know your personal story with Bitcoin, could you please elucidate the audience on why Bitcoin was so important to you in your personal life?
Absolutely. In my case, Bitcoin literally saved my life. I lived what, those poor folks in Iran are going through now in 2019 and 2020 in Lebanon, where it happened first, where the central banks and the governments essentially stole everybody's life savings, and then the currency hyperinflated to zero, in the same situation that the Iranians are living through right now. And that, after many, many, many dark months of contemplating, life itself, eventually found my way into Bitcoin and understood, the truth about money, and essentially that everything that I had thought I knew about it previous to Bitcoin was a complete lie. We have never lived in a free market. The money that, we work with, that worthless paper that we save in a bank, is not money. It's complete garbage, created by a pack of thieves, essentially, that, is created to steal from us 24/7. And so when you experience a rug pull like this, where a Thor hammer lands on your head and nukes your entire life and sets you back to zero, you never forget it. And your lens on the world changes, completely, does a 180. And then once you find out that an option like Bitcoin exists, where it becomes that exit, where that a Lebanon situation can no longer happen in it, well, then, it's a one-way street. And so you just need to learn what it is. It comes from the world of tech. We've never seen it before. Humanity has never had an asset like Bitcoin before, which is why so many folks still have a hard time wrapping their heads around it, which is a valid concern, because I doubted it initially when I experienced it. When I thought it was too good to be true. But it takes doing the work, learning, reading, watching the right videos, asking the right questions to understand, that this is, essentially the torrents of money, peer-to-peer technology, something that is impossible to stop from a tech level. And if there was a way, it would have been done a long time ago for a lot more, less important things, right? And so you fast forward to today, 17 years later, Bitcoin's network and network effects have grown exponentially. The decentralization and strength are stronger than ever before. And a lot more people are starting to understand the realities of the world they live in, and that the money is broken. And the reason behind all the misery, calamity, evil, wars, genocides, you name it, around the world, are all linked to that broken money. And so the move towards a Renaissance world is, in play right now. And it's just going to take, for more countries to collapse, like unfortunately Iran is going through right now, for more people to realize that this isn't isolated to other people. Eventually, this is coming to every single country on earth, because the common denominator in all of them is that broken money.
It is. Jody, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm saying I know I really appreciate the work you've been doing to onboard Bitcoiners. I think now we have a why. I think people didn't always get it, especially in the United States. They didn't have a pain point. They have good banking access, but as you lay out, you experience that in Lebanon, and now it's very visceral. If we're taking over, taking a Venezuelan leader, or what's happening in Iran. Today, for the audience, we want to focus on really taking your expertise, Tony, and then helping people understand what they should be thinking about. Like, even if they're not currently in Iran, they should be thinking about, how do you protect your wealth? How do you set up future generations in your clan to be able to prosper and then not lose your life savings? I'll start quickly with the news, and then let's kind of get into more of the juicy stuff that we like to do. So Bitcoin options, calm reigns. What we're seeing now is the Bitcoin options has surpassed the Bitcoin futures market, which shows institutional adoption. We see that companies are looking, or not companies, but institutional investors are investing in Bitcoin. And now we're going to have less volatility if the options market is bigger than the futures market. Tony, I want to ask you on the second point, the Samourai Wallet. We saw today, second letter, or from the second founder, a letter from jail and custody has been written. Donald Trump had called out that he was looking to get amnesty for the Samourai developers. You've been a good advocate for open source software. What's been your take on the Samourai situation?
It's appalling. It's absolutely disgusting that these poor innocent folks have to endure, time in jail over something that is not supposed to be a thing in the first place. Writing code is not a crime. It's never been a crime. The fact, that someone decided it should be weaponized against human beings that are trying to provide the world, with something that protects their God-given right to privacy is appalling. And to me, it just highlights the fact that the justice system is a farce. There is no legitimate legal system. If a bunch of lunatics can go ahead and change a few words on a piece of paper, and then all of a sudden turn around and weaponize something that against innocent folks, this is something that everybody should be up in arms about. Because even though this specific case doesn't affect hundreds of millions of people yet, the mere fact that someone can change the law so quickly and easily, at some point your turn will come with something. And so that precedent must be completely eliminated, in my opinion, and never allowed to surface again. And these guys that are sitting in jail now for absolutely no legitimate reason should be released 3 days ago. They should have never been sentenced to begin with. And that just highlights, that these folks were working on something that returns the power of privacy to the people. But because it goes against the legacy system, the money printer and the broken money itself, it was framed as a threat to that system, whose entire DNA is around surveillance, control, and just making sure that they have eyes on every little thing that you spend your money on. Something that should have never been in place in the first place. So these guys are now all of a sudden enemies of the state, because they gave humanity a way to protect themselves against this flagrant abuse, and now they're sitting in jail. So I am completely appalled. I hope he releases them. I mean, just as a dignified human being, I think it's the minimum that should be done. And a precedent should be put in place so that something like this never, ever shows up on anyone's radar anymore.
Yeah.
I was just going to follow up there. We've seen this, the chilling effect that you talked about. We saw Ross at Bitcoin last year. That was a pretty powerful speech that he gave as well. from the Bitcoin Ways perspective, you talked about before the conversation today about like how important self-sovereignty is. You were just touching on it just now as well. But at the same time, we see all these ETFs come in, we see the institutions come in. So all the tools that like are being used for that self-sovereignty, a lot of the inflows, going back to the options piece of it, a lot of that has come in through ETFs. And inherently older folks like my parents, for example, they may want Bitcoin, some connection to Bitcoin, and that's the easiest way for them to do it. So you guys are helping them. But what if like the demand and governments just keep coming down our throats like over and over again? And it's like it's crazy. You see this right. I'm in New York, so we see like Mamdani coming in, and you see in Chicago, and there was a person I think in Arizona as well. And so I'm not going to go ahead and say it's full communism today, but it feels like we're moving that direction where we're more dependent on government. So how are you, over at your company? Is this going to be like a two-tiered like Bitcoin environment where there's the ETFs and institutional side and then the self-sovereignty? Like, how do we create this like plan B for on-chain privacy ultimately?
You hit on a lot of really, really good points, and I'll try to unpack them as best as possible. To begin with, we've been living in a fiat world for a very long time. So people have been accustomed to that world, for many, many decades. And human beings are, a bit allergic to drastic change. And so where Bitcoin, completely revolutionizes the way, we live our lives is the fact that it's actually money, with the main distinction is that it's not government or central bank issued. It's it's digital money. It's backed up by code, protected by math and cryptography. There's no living soul who can make decisions about Bitcoin. There's no CEO, there's no company, there's no government, there's no bank, there's no one. But what it does is that it turns the tables on us, the individuals, by forcing us to assume personal responsibility and killing the belief that you still need third parties to protect your money. This is the convenience that we traded our freedom for over many decades, and which has led us to the disastrous situation that you rightfully described as headed towards communism, because that's the legacy system. That's the fiat system by design. Like, it's not like a fluke that it's the way it is. It was designed to be this way. It was just not felt in its infancy. And now that there's a real competitor to that entire world, well, now we're seeing these draconian measures to protect it. Because, essentially, when you've got a bunch of people that have been living for free at the expense of 8 billion people, and now comes this new sheriff in town that is completely, eliminating their power and control while they don't like it. And so that forces them to go to extremities in order to lock people into their system and avoid them from learning the truth about this new competitor that they cannot stop. That is fundamentally what it comes down to. Governments and banks and institutions know that Bitcoin is not going anywhere. They may have tried to kill it in the past. They failed. You fast forward 17 years later, it's never going to happen. It's too late for that. So what do they try to do? They continue to attack it, but this time differently. They cannot attack it on a tech level because that's not going to work. So they attack it with by shifting the narrative, by hoping that the ignorance of the masses, is enough for them to not give up, to remain complacent and dependent on a system that is designed to extract from them. So what are these attacks look like? To me, the ETFs, the Bitcoin treasuries, all of this legacy finance using Bitcoin as wrappers are the attacks on Bitcoin. Why? Because again, it keeps you dependent on a system that was designed to extract from you. This is why, when I hear people saying, yeah, but the governments are adopting it and all that. Yes, they're adopting it not because they love it, but because they know it's not going anywhere. And so they want you to believe that Bitcoin is safe now because somehow they're involved. They want you to believe that custody is a service. They don't want you to give up your bad habits of depending on a third party to use your Bitcoin. They want to self-custody Bitcoin, but they want you to remain a slave to their services. And so self-custody is the Bitcoin revolution. It was created for that purpose, to separate the power of money from state. There's no other way to sugarcoat this. And so the more people learn about this and how to adopt these tools and to use and manage and to think about Bitcoin as money, well, this is where we start heading towards a two-tiered system. So the fact that governments and institutions are adopting Bitcoin, that's like, I don't have to like it, but I know it's inevitable because Bitcoin by nature is neutral. It doesn't care who you are, where you come from, what your beliefs are. It just exists as money in a form that no one can corrupt. And so governments are going to adopt it, institutions are going to adopt it. They're going to try to sell the world, with whatever services that they think customers are going to purchase. And again, when you've been used to doing something one way and you don't want to learn, because unfortunately the masses don't like to critically think, right? And so when you're just doing what you're accustomed to doing, thinking it's better to outsource the responsibility to someone else, well, then at some point you're going to learn that harsh lesson that the folks in Lebanon, Venezuela, today, recently in Iran, have learned. That if the money is not in your control, your entire life belongs to someone else. And that someone else has an immense advantage over you. And if they have bad intentions towards you, which we're clearly starting to see, across the world, you're in a very bad spot. You are not a free individual. And so if you want to break those chains, you've got to understand that Bitcoin now is that exit. It is a viable option to 8 billion people. It's not something that maybe you can do. It's something you can 100% do. You don't need to go out and buy an entire Bitcoin. It's a savings technology, not a speculation, not a stock, not a share, not something that you're going to buy and hold to sell for more worthless paper that keeps you dependent on a system that has no good intentions towards you. That's the education that we work really hard to push out into the world, because there's a lot of noise out there. We don't have the resources of nation states that are currently, like shifting narratives, funding, news channels to push out FUD and what have you. We do whatever we can to prove to people what the truth about Bitcoin is. And I think the world situation is Bitcoin's best marketing department. Like, you can't ask for a better ad for Bitcoin than just to see how things, globally are falling apart.
Real quick follow up on that. So I know you mentioned the governments feel like a badger, that is cornered at a certain point where they can't get, from a self sovereignty, it's impossible to stop the tech. But in a worst case scenario, like Executive Order 6102, right? So for those unfamiliar, in 1933, the government didn't allow people to own gold. So is there a situation where, from an OPSEC perspective, that they can go door to door, and if they can track your keys ultimately, or if they're able to say, hey, if you own Bitcoin in your possession, you'll go to jail for life. Do you think, does that disrupt? One, do you think that's ever possible? And I potentially could see it happening, maybe not in the US, but in other countries. And then two, how do Bitcoiners avoid that? I know it's a little hard to obviously track the location of private keys, but if they said, hey, it's illegal, and if you own any Bitcoin, you get the death penalty or you go to jail for life. How do Bitcoiners avoid that?
The thing is, nobody has a crystal ball to predict what other people are going to do. Bitcoin doesn't belong to any government, so they have no authority over it, right? But when you describe scenarios that you just stated here, what you're describing is a criminal organization, plundering and threatening and bullying and criminalizing things just to exist. I don't think many people are just going to sit there and let that happen, at least not anymore, right? And Bitcoin's OPSEC is not something that you can easily confiscate. What's easily confiscatable is all of those that are buying ETFs, buying Bitcoin treasuries, leaving their Bitcoin on an exchange. Anything that still involves a third party is a 30-second confiscation. It's on the table. That's the easiest thing. In the same way, if you remember many years ago, they shut down Napster for supposedly illegal music sharing. This is identical, no difference, except now it's Bitcoin, it's not music files. So when you're holding your Bitcoin in self-custody, you make that exponentially impossible. And because it's virtual, there is an infinite amount of ways to obfuscate and prevent any form of theft. They can hit you, they can kill you, they can throw you in jail, they're not getting your money. That's the difference, right? And so if the plan is to attack hundreds of millions of users because they think they're self-custodying Bitcoin, I hope that doesn't happen. But if it does, I'm fairly confident that there's going to be a large enough number of people that are not going to be sitting down just letting it happen. And this is where this can potentially turn to something really ugly that I'm hoping we never have to experience. The incentives not to do this, even for a government, are much bigger than going down that route. Like a government is much more like if they think for 2 minutes, they're much more incentivized to embrace Bitcoin and Bitcoiners because of the massive contributions that'll bring to the country, rather than demonize everybody and go out on a full-scale war against 8 billion people, which it's not going to be a successful one. So again, I hope it doesn't happen. I don't think it will. I don't put any country off the table when it comes to these crazy things. I know we say, oh, but my country would never do this. Why? If their existence is threatened and they have no options, why wouldn't they do it? We need to get to a point where no matter what they try, they can't move ahead. And this is what we're seeing now in the explosion of open source software, Bitcoin decentralization. The tools are becoming easier to use. A lot more people are understanding that this is money, not a speculation that you leave with a third party. Like, people are starting to focus on these things. They're starting to wake up and pay attention and realize that, hold on a second, I don't need to be somebody's slave anymore. I can reclaim full control over my life, my time and energy by learning 7 or 8 new steps. So if you come from a tech background, there's plenty of resources online. You can sit and watch some videos, do a few trial and errors. Hopefully you get it right. If you don't want to do this, and most people don't, because the mere thought of making a mistake and losing their funds terrifies them, which is a valid concern, then there are people around the globe like us that'll walk you through that entire process. There's no way you make a mistake with us, because we literally click here, do this, do that sort of thing. We've curated the whole thing. We know our recommendations. We have extremely high and strict security guidelines when it comes to self-custody. We will train you from being someone who knows nothing to someone who's as comfortable as we are, using Bitcoin as money in full self-custody, zero counterparty risk, zero third-party custodians, you and you alone. Build an inheritance plan where you can take this infrastructure that you've built, pass it along to your loved ones without the involvement of the legacy system if you don't want to. Bitcoin exists outside the system. It's peer-to-peer money. So can your inheritance plan. Most people don't know that this is an option available to them. We let them know that it is, and we help them build those security protocols that balances the highest levels of security and practicality, so that when they pass it along to others who are not necessarily tech savvy, they can find their way, in that entire structure that we've helped them put together.
Rony, so this actually gets into next segment, Bitcoin everyday carry. I think the best way to structure this, we normally do on the Friday stack, every Friday, we'll do a Mount Rushmore. So we're doing a snake draft of, we'll each draft different, topics or answers to a certain question. But here, I think everyday carry, we should let's go around, and specifically want to spend more time on you is short-term spending with Bitcoin, long-term spending with Bitcoin, and inheritance with Bitcoin. I will go first off the top of my head. So short-term spending, I have, I think, 8 different apps on my phone. None of them have a lot of money, so don't attack me. It's probably $20. But for short-term spending, I'll use, I think I have Blue Wallet, I have Blockstream's wallet, I have Zeus, I have a few others, Wallet of Satoshi. So keep, I think, in my regards, $20 on there. So I'll pay for things, day to day, using something that's light, small. If someone took it, it's not a big deal. I am a fan of, I have moved for long-term holding into like something that's either multi-sig, so using multiple hardware wallets, cold wallets that are air-gapped. And then last one, inheritance. That's one I'm figuring out. So I don't have a plan to disclose to each of you. I think right now it's what you would consider a very rough manual process of moving over and transferring over the information for the hardware wallet access. But it's also this multi-sig, so it is secure. It is gapped by like different devices. But yeah, want to jump into what in each of those three categories. What do you think of as everyday carry for what you guys are recommending now? I know you've mentioned open source, Bitcoin focus, but we'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, look, man, I mean, when it comes to Bitcoin, fundamentally, what we want people to understand that this is money, that you need to use it as money. It's not solely like, don't buy into the narrative that Bitcoin is only a store of value, because if it's not used as money, Bitcoin will fail because it'll get centralized, it'll get co-opted. There's no more value. The fact that Bitcoin has value is because there's enough people out there that are using it as money, because it's the only way it remains decentralized and secure. Like if you think about it, how many people have enough capital to go out and buy Bitcoin and hold it in self-custody? I'd say maybe 1 to 3% of the global population, maybe those that are paying attention. How many people can use it as money? 8.3 billion people, right? So that is why peer-to-peer is really where the value is. I think it should be used more as a medium of exchange first, rather than a store of value. I mean, it's all three in one, the unit of account too, but you can't pick and choose which part of it you prefer and let somebody else worry about the rest, right? It all has to work in unison. So when it comes to spending Bitcoin, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of tools out there. Hot wallets on a phone are like, think about them as like cash in your pocket. You don't, I mean, it's all relative to every person. Like for someone, $50 is enough. For someone else, $500,000 could be spending money. It's all relative. But the point is, it should be money that you are okay losing, right? And so when you carry that amount of money with you, you have Bitcoin at your disposal. So if you have a merchant that accepts it, you pay them natively in it. In fact, you encourage merchants to accept Bitcoin so that more regular folks start seeing it and understanding subconsciously that this is a new form of money, right? So this is what we do a lot here at the Bitcoin Way, is that when we encounter clients that own businesses, for example, we help them build infrastructures to accept Bitcoin, and in fact offer incentives to get paid in Bitcoin. So if you have a product that's being sold for $100, and now you're able to accept Bitcoin, well, we tell folks, well, offer it at a discount like $70 if somebody pays you in discount, because you want them to pay you in real money, not that worthless paper. And so because of that considerable discount, people are going to like, okay, well, what do I do? Like, how do I pay this? What is this thing that I'm getting a $30 discount on? And so you start opening up the minds of folks that have never considered Bitcoin before to start thinking of it the way you want them to think of it. And recently, Square and Cash App like unleashed hell when it comes to that in the US by giving 4 million merchants the possibility to accept it with a click of a button. That is huge. And folks can even pay these merchants in Bitcoin even if they don't have the Bitcoin initially, because the app itself acts as the middleman. That is huge. Like, this is one of the most bullish news that I've ever read. And I'm expecting more news like this to come about as the tools and apps and hardware and software become more mature, more simplified, easier to use, more accessible. You become, that it becomes that unstoppable train. So this is what gets me exciting. I don't focus on price and charts. I don't focus on government regulation. I don't focus on institutional adoption. I focus on the Bitcoin network effects, because that is ultimately what makes Bitcoin so valuable and why it's taking over the world. As more people get to know it, as more people have easier access to it, as more people adopt it as money, you cannot stop this technology. It's too late for that. If they wanted to do it, that should have been done on year 1 or 2. Now, it's a lost cause. So don't even waste energy contemplating that thought. But then again, you can expect different creative narratives. We had the quantum FUD coming out. Oh my God, supercomputers are going to nuke Bitcoin. It's going to go to zero. Says who? says some idiot out there that is just, putting out information for engagement. That is not true. Follow the facts. Follow real intelligent people working on real solutions to address this nonsense. Bitcoin is the world's most valuable asset. We have never seen anything like it. Believe me when I tell you, there are millions of eyes watching the Bitcoin code 24/7. And there's too many big players invested in that asset to let frivolous nonsense affect it now. And so eliminate the noise and focus really on where the signal is. Spending money as Bitcoin, holding it offline for your big savings, being very strict about the criteria for the hardware that you use. You don't want to take a willy-nilly approach, just use any product on the market just because it says Bitcoin compatible, right? This is not how we do it. We at the Bitcoin, we have very strict guidelines. If it's not open source, verifiable source, Bitcoin only, fully air-gapped as a signing device, we don't touch it. Even though the risks with other products may be low, if there's an option to eliminate that risk, we will take it. And I'm the type of individual that'll update my entire setup every 20 minutes if I know there's a better way to do it. And I will push out that recommendation right away. Because this is the most exciting opportunity human beings have ever had. This is not something to say, oh my gosh, it's so much work. This is something to say, holy shit, man, like this is like Disneyland in my hands now, right? And so I want to learn it. I want to optimize it. I want to fine tune it because it's going to take me to a world I've never known before. The purchasing power of individuals focusing on Bitcoin today and the last 17 years is something you're going to read about in history books in about 100, 200 years from now. Like to find a Bitcoiner holding a UTXO, that's like finding like a needle in a haystack. It's going to be like so ridiculously expensive that the mere thought of having it is like no chance, right?
Yeah.
But because we're so early, we take it for granted. And so again, it comes down to education. It comes down to making people focus on the right details, the right signal, and not get carried away with all the nonsense that's out there.
And so you're talking to people every single day, and your team is, who want to take further control of their Bitcoin, of their financial security, and their life. And your company has been built in the last 2 to 3 years during this proliferation of Bitcoin ETFs and Bitcoin treasury companies. So have you seen anybody come to you who got started from Bitcoin ETFs or treasury companies and then want the real thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, people have to come to Bitcoin their own way. You need something to attract their attention, whether it's the ETF, whether it's a Bitcoin treasury, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. You want people to focus, to understand that there is this thing called Bitcoin. How they get into it initially is not really my concern. What their final destination is, though, that's more important to me, because I need them to, they understand that this is something that they must have. Now they need to understand that this is something that they can own. And by owning it is the only way they win with Bitcoin, because that completely eliminates counterparty risk. And we provide the tools and education to help people have confidence in themselves to do this, because initially everybody's petrified, like, holy shit, what if I make a mistake, my computer breaks, my money's gone. Valid concerns, no doubt. But once you're taught the skills, you repeat them enough time, you build enough muscle memory, you do this on autopilot, irrespective of the amount of money that you're dealing with. Like when you have a cup of coffee, do you think twice about it? No. When you get in your car and you drive, do you think twice about it? No. But when you first got behind the wheel, your first day, sure, you were nervous. There's nothing different here. And initially, you don't have to get started with your entire life savings. You start off with like a silly amount that you just experiment with until you see it in motion, you build the skills, you build the confidence. And then once that clicks, whether it's $5 or 5 billion, the steps don't change. So if you're doing this, in 30 seconds with a $5 transaction, you can do it in the same amount of time with a $5 billion transaction in Bitcoin. Steps don't change. That's something that when you first tell someone this news, they're like, they're taken aback. Like, are you sure? I'm like, I'm 100% sure, because that's the power of Bitcoin, right? No middleman, point A to point B whenever you want. Power in your hands. Self-custody is the most empowering human feature you can ever have. That's why I call it Bitcoin like the 9th or 10th wonder of the world. It eclipses everything we've ever known because it's not optional to 8 billion people. It's money, the elixir of life. You cannot live without a form of money to communicate with other people.
So you mentioned before, and I want to, for the audience that's a little bit newer to Bitcoin, you mentioned Airgapped and you mentioned open source. Can you help define these terms for someone you would be speaking with that's a beginner, very new to the space?
Absolutely. So an air-gapped device, basically, it's a device that never connects to a computer. The seed phrase, the private keys, your 12 or 24 words, these are generated offline, and then they're secured and kept offline forever. And of course, you learn how to build redundancy and so forth. But that seed phrase alone is not enough for self-custody. It's good as long as nobody finds that seed phrase, but we don't rely on that probability, right? So there's other moving parts that you can also add on to that seed phrase in order to secure it and lock it down even further. And of course, there's also, proper protocols to follow, redundancy to follow as well, keeping them in different locations. All part of the training into how to properly secure your Bitcoin and, more importantly, know how to recover it should you need to do so, under whatever circumstance. The other thing that we also let people know is that the hardware doesn't matter, which is, again, why this is so empowering. If you start with product A and you lose it, or it breaks, or something happens to it, you don't have to worry. Your money is not gone. Your money is never sitting on any piece of hardware, be it your computer, your Bitcoin node, your air-gapped wallet. It's not there. Your money is on the Bitcoin blockchain, and these devices simply tell the blockchain that this little piece of it belongs to you. So if all hell breaks loose and you lose your stuff, or you have to leave with nothing but yourself, when you arrive, you can repurchase all the gear that's required, even if it's different from what you initially started with, and the whole thing can be reconstructed in under 30 minutes, as if nothing happened, right? So you cannot do this in the legacy system. You just can't. The money that you're saving in, the dollars, the euros, whatever other fiat currency, first of all, it's not money. And you're putting it in the hands of someone who owns it now. This is why I tell folks, when you opened up your bank account, they made you sign 700 pieces of paper. Did you actually read them? Not a single person read anything. But essentially what you were doing is that you were giving legal right to that money to the bank, and they technically owe it to you. So if they don't like you one day for whatever reason, they don't have to legally. And this is what folks are starting to realize today, is that they post something on social media, poof, money's gone. Or they do something, poof, money's gone. Or they wake up one morning and it's really all gone. All savings accounts are gone, like in Lebanon, like in Iran. That is becoming a reality for more folks. Like, it's starting to hit home much more than it used to. It's no longer for these other folks in these crazy countries. Now you can feel the heat is coming to you. And so Bitcoin changes that. Bitcoin's your insurance policy so that this shit show doesn't affect you.
Yeah. One thing that terrifies me that I think not enough attention is given to is, if you think about the mode or the medium of ETFs is holding Bitcoin, and if you mirror the system in the United States to other countries, you have Coinbase Custody that is the custodian for like 10 out of 13 ETFs that are focused on Bitcoin. And so normally you have qualified custodians, they go through a regulation process, they certify themselves, they have security practices in place. But you think about like that in a country like Venezuela, because it's ran by, there's 1,000 generals that have their hands in all these different businesses, you arguably would have a qualified custodian be the National Bank of Venezuela. So there's only one custodian for all ETFs. And so if someone decides, I want to take control of the National Bank of Venezuela or the Construction Bank of Venezuela or any big entity, they're taking control of all the Bitcoin held by all ETFs. It's a very risky medium because you're trusting that whatever entity that is going to, basically, not be corrupted. And in so many countries, that's just not the case. So many of these national banks, these national custodians are so easily infiltrated by either the military or political regime that doesn't have your best interests in mind.
No, you're absolutely right. ETFs and all these services. This isn't Bitcoin. This is counterparty risk. It's no different than leaving your money in a bank. You have a proxy to Bitcoin, and if Bitcoin does well, you're earning in the fiat currency. You know that's in. You're still bound to the same regulations. You still have to pay your tax bill if you have one. You know, and nothing really has changed except you're just using a different product. And so most people are accustomed to this, which is why you see so much money now in ETFs, right? And so to me, it's just blows my mind, like how many, high net worth individuals, which I always thought they must be like intelligent folks, right? To have so much money to begin with, how much of these folks are in these ETFs, which tells me that they don't understand what money is. They don't want to understand what it is. They're taking the path of least resistance because, that's all they know, and praying that nothing goes wrong. But what they are doing is setting themselves up for the perfect 6102 in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's finite supply, that 21 million, is going to become worth exponentially more than anything we have ever known in our entire existence. And when that day comes, when like the motivation is there, 30 seconds, someone comes in with enough power and guns and takes everything. And those at the other end, sorry, it wasn't our fault, it was somebody else's fault, but the result is the same. Your money's gone. And so we need, this is why we're still early to this, because we need to break bad habits. But you need people to be willing and open-minded to learn about all of this stuff and to have the confidence to take action, right? And so the more education that's put out there, the more simplified these tools become, the easier it gets to go from point A to point B. I think we're going to start more and more people, coming this way. And we're starting to see it. I mean, just in our little, circle here at the Bitcoin Way, we're seeing a massive difference just between 2 years ago. First of all, the questions that are being asked are very different. It's no longer how high do you think Bitcoin's price is going to go. We rarely get that anymore. In fact, we get more interest when the price drops lately than when it pumps. That for me is extremely bullish, because it tells me that this person coming in now understands the long game. He understands that this is an opportunity, not a risk. And so these people's conviction is not going anywhere, because once somebody understands that the power of money now is in their control, they're never going to give it up. And so we want more people to learn this. And those high net worth individuals that are placing so much capital in the hands of others have the most to lose. That's the ironic part, is that they have all this wealth that they've accumulated over, their entire careers. And overnight it can disappear. Then what happens? So this is what we're trying to avoid here. I can't stop the world from doing what it's doing. I can't stop governments from adopting Bitcoin. I can't stop institutions from offering ETFs and Bitcoin treasuries and all that other stuff that I don't believe in myself. But I can put out education to highlight the difference and the risks between both. And then it's up to every individual, individual with a bit of common sense to assess both scenarios and to pick the one that they believe has the better incentives. And I genuinely believe that over time, self-custody will take over, and that trusting a third party with money will be seen as a form of mental illness.
Yeah, so let's hop into our last section here. What we saw overnight in Iran is pretty shocking. If you can see it here on the screen, try to make it as big as possible there. But yeah, I mean, we had an Omega candle, right? This was back in 2023 after the Bitcoin crash to about 15,000. a couple months later, we had a regional bank crisis in America. And that led to Balaji, the former CTO of Coinbase, and somebody who has been a big Bitcoin proponent, but as well as some other coins, whatever. But he put out a Bitcoin bet. He said, these banks are going down. We are going to see hyperinflation in America very shortly, and that within a matter of months, Bitcoin is going to go to $1 million. And thus this iconic graphic was born, where it was just a flat line on the bottom. All of the price action looks like nothing compared to that one moment where everything changes. And that is what we just saw in Iran this week, right? Of course, there's been protests since the beginning of this new year, and they've really escalated over the last 3 or 4 days. The internet has been officially been cut in Iran for over 120 hours. Nobody is really able to get much information out, but of course there are some links, some Starlink connection and whatnot able to surface and be spread online. But we saw this price. When your fiat is a confidence game, and overnight it can collapse. And that is what we saw in Iran, going up to the price of 103 billion Iranian rials in very short order. So yeah, I mean, that's 100 rials per sat, right? Absolutely insane. And so this last section here with you, Tony, we want to talk about, okay, so how are you prepared in a situation like this? What kind of steps do you need to take beforehand so that, say, there is a currency crisis, things flip overnight, you're able to leave, you and your loved ones are able to take your wealth with you? What do you need to have prepared? What do you need to practice? And what should those in your family, in your party, know in order to be able to, say, cross a border with your wealth in your head or on a device? What is the best practice, and what should we do here?
You need to be prepared. It's as simple as that. I mean, step one, you need to protect your money, Bitcoin in full self-custody, because when all hell breaks loose, the custodians are no longer there. Like, you have access to nothing except for what you physically have. And so if you can't pay for anything, well, then you're stuck. And the other part of the puzzle that's now also becoming, just as important than protecting the money is really protecting yourself. If you're living in a jurisdiction where you're starting to see the red flags, which are, for example, an extreme push towards tyranny, whether digital IDs, central bank digital currencies, requiring verification to use a search engine, like, all of these are massive, massive red flags, pointing towards a disaster, an imminent disaster. When you see these, if you're in a position to leave, then you should consider it. Because even though the money is safe, like, let's say you do have your Bitcoin in self-custody, but you're stuck in Iran, where there's violence and chaos and people killing each other all around you. You're not safe. Even though your money is okay, you're not. And that's a bigger problem. And so the self-custody and the plan B today, in my opinion, they go hand in hand. Most, like, if you're in a position where you can't afford to leave, that's one thing. But if you can, you definitely should consider it, because it's all part of the insurance policy. Not everywhere is doom and gloom. Like, if you read the news, you might assume that, oh my gosh, like, no, there's nowhere to go because they're all going to hell. That's not true. There's many places on the planet that are not engaging in any of these draconian measures, and are welcoming individuals to them, because they see the value in human contribution. Like, their incentives aren't to continuously attack and abuse and plunder to extract value. They know that if people come on their own volition, human beings can create amazing things. And if they come with their money, that money is going to be used to build these countries in ways we've never known before. And so the journey to self-sovereignty, man, it's no longer like a one-trick pony. It's different elements that we need to think about now in order to be able to transition from point A to point where we're sleeping well at night, knowing that our money's okay, we're okay, our families are okay, there's no one coming after us to hunt us. Like, we don't have to worry about these headaches. And so again, it comes down to awareness, to education, to understanding that no one is stuck. There are millions of folks around the globe that'll go out of their way to help folks. Bitcoiners in general are that type of people. I've never met a Bitcoiner that is not willing to help in whatever capacity that they can. And so again, it might feel lonely to be on this journey, depending, where you are. People might think you're nuts, but you're not nuts. And it's okay. Like if your family doesn't fully agree with you, sometimes it's not really their job. Your job is to make sure that they're okay. So if you're the one that sees the light and you're in a position to, build that insurance policy for everyone, they will thank you later at some point. But somebody's got to do it. And so just do it without expecting, some form of recognition. I was guilty of that initially, but I stopped doing this because I understood that I'm not going to win everyone over, but if I'm in a position to help, at some point they will come around and admit that they were wrong. But the point is, you need to get from point very bad to point very safe as quickly as possible.
On that journey, I know we talked about our local Bitcoin meetup around the security of having a 12-word seed phrase versus 24-word seed phrase. I can't remember who brought this up, was saying, 12 words is fine for most people. Like, it is just as hard, or not just as hard, but it's mathematically very close to having a 24-word seed phrase. So want to validate that with you. And then second would be, if you're someone in Venezuela and Iran right now, are you recommending memorize those words? Like, that's number one, is memorize those words. That's what you're taking across the border in your head, and then worry about any type of metal seed stamp or hardware wallet or any other device, just in case of confiscation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it depends on the situation. In Iran right now, you're in crisis mode. So you need to do anything just to get yourself out of harm's way. And you need to do it in the quickest possible way. So if that involves, memorizing 12 steps, that's like your quickest path to protecting your money and taking it with you, then yeah, absolutely do that. And then, when you're somewhere else where you're a bit more calm and there's no immediate threat to you, then you can work on perfecting that model and scaling it upwards. But you act based on imminent needs. This is not like, you don't have to get it flawless from day one. It's also a journey, and there's no such thing as getting it flawless. Like, even for someone like myself, I'm always learning and perfecting and tweaking and fine-tuning and changing and redoing, when it's validated, right? And so again, people in crisis situations, their options are not as abundant as you, right? I mean, they have to really go, they have to leave the fire. And so they have to do this as quickly as possible.
So yeah, I mean, 12 words is it's an amazing superpower. So why not have it, right? And to be able to cross a border with your wealth in your head is very, very important. There's so much going on in the world, and Tony, I really think that you are one of the best advertisers, proselytizers of Bitcoin. You go straight to the heart of the message and make sure that people know that they are dealing not with just some regular financial asset, but something that can really change their life and change the way that people look at it. So for people who are just starting, what are some of the good resources that you like to send them on their way with?
Resources as in learning about Bitcoin?
Yeah, books, podcasts, anything.
I would send them to people who deliver real signal. Like people like Saifedean Ammous, listen to good folks, like Jeff Booth. Recently, I've been a big fan of Simon Dixon. He's gone down the research rabbit hole like no other person I've ever met before. I 100% agree with everything that he said. I just didn't realize that someone actually put names and history dates to all of these facts, right? Like, I always knew about them, but he actually gave them titles and names and dates and what have you, which cement everything that you need to know, that how urgently you need to get out of that fiat world into something where you are no longer susceptible to all the evil that it brings that it brings along with it. The reason why I'm so passionate about this is because I remember the hell that I lived through for almost a year. It's extremely personal to me. It's extremely painful. I make it a point not to forget it. And so every day that I go to work, it's to hopefully prevent someone from living that nightmare, because I know it's coming.
Yeah.
It's not a theory in my head. I know it's coming. And so people that are delusional, thinking that they won't be touched by this, are usually the first ones to get hit, because I was one of them. I was financially extremely comfortable in Lebanon. I was living the life of a king. Believe me, I had it all. And then overnight, in a light switch, it was gone. So if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone, no matter how many fake zeros you think you have on a screen. This is not the same world anymore. And so this is why I'm so passionate about this. And this is why I remain unfiltered. And this is why I don't care about sugarcoating the truth. People need to hear it, because sugarcoating is not going to get you to where you have to be. You need to understand that if you don't do anything, you're going to get screwed. And being screwed is a very dangerous place to be, depending on how badly you get screwed. So that's why Bitcoin in self-custody is extremely important, not just to me, but to 8.3 billion people. And just know that, again, there are options out there where you don't have to wait until everything comes crumbling down on your head before you act. You act before the fire reaches you, not after everything is up in flames.
I remember the story in Lebanon when the banks froze everyone's funds. I think a couple of years ago, where
2019, October 2019, and it went through the beginnings of 2020 when everything collapsed.
Yeah.
This is what you're seeing in Iran right now.
Gone to the bank because she needed her funds to pay for an operation, I think for her daughter or for her child. And that kind of thing where you're like that, it's not like you just need to take out a mortgage and you can't buy a house and like pushes back the close date a month. It's like you need to proceed.
You couldn't go to the bank. You couldn't make it to the bank. I know, because I tried. When I got there, there were thousands of people busting down that bank. You had guns, knives, hammers, screwdrivers, whatever you call it, because people wanted to get into the bank to take out their own money. They weren't there to steal. They wanted their savings, right? They have kids to feed. They have parents that are sick. They have bills to pay. And somebody told them, well, too bad, your money's gone. There's nothing we can do. Figure it out. Nobody prepares you for this. Believe me, you've never seen this. You've never seen this movie before. And the people in Iran, like, my heart breaks for them, because I know how many people are suffering right now. I know how many people are being killed right now. It's an extremely, extremely ugly movie that I don't want, more people to have to live through. And so the fact that Bitcoin skyrocketed, you're seeing a Godzilla Omega candle. Put all the adjectives on the planet in that candle, for sure you're going to see them. Because now it's been 17 years that Bitcoin exists. Everybody, unless you've been living under a rock, has heard of it. And so no one who's going through this much pain is going to take one iota of risk of going back to that shithole. And so Bitcoin is that exit. And so everybody is going to funnel their way into it. And because of its scarce supply, you're going to see these insane numbers on a screen. It's because the fiat currency that's being measured, against Bitcoin is going to zero, just in the same way that the Iranian Rial did, in the same way that the Lebanese pound went to zero, in the same way that many other fiat currencies went to zero. It's all coming, including the US dollar.
Yeah. So if you're looking to get in touch with Tony, if you're looking to get in touch with, getting started on your Bitcoin journey, we do have Tony and the Bitcoin Way featured on our website, switch101race.com. In our learning center, you go to this special spot we put just for you guys, our partner Bitcoin Way, help up with self-custody setup. You guys do a lot on cybersecurity education. I think that's a piece that shouldn't be taken for granted, of what does Airgapped mean? Why is open source important? Understanding, like you mentioned, 1 million people looking at the Bitcoin code every single day, looking at quantum every single day. If it's closed source, who's looking at it? Just a single company, right? That has access to see that code. So I think there's a lot of great education there. So any listeners, click in there and go talk to the Bitcoin Way. I'm not going to be able to set you up nearly as good as Tony and his team.
Guys, it was a pleasure, man. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a more OCD team out there than the Bitcoin Way. For us, this is not an afternoon hobby or a side project. For us, this is, like, you can think of it as like mission critical, life or death. type of education and setups, so that you are well equipped when your turn comes. It's not if your turn comes, it's just when it comes.
Roger that. Get prepared today because you don't know what's coming tomorrow. Tony, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's really a masterclass to hear you because you speak from experience and you are still learning yourself. You are a constant student. You're always upgrading your setup and you are quick to disseminate that knowledge to the rest of us. So appreciate you coming on and would love to have you on again and again in the future.
Anytime, guys. Thank you for having me, man. It's been a blast.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony.
All right. Cheers, everybody. That's been the Daily Stack for this day, Tuesday, January 13th. We'll be back tomorrow, 12:30 p.m. Eastern for a market show. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Make the Daily Stack a part of your daily routine.